Princess Valith Sarandri had always believed that humans were a primitive species, and she had good reason to think so, because her people, the Sarani, had ruled the galactic cluster for 12,000 years, while humans had only recently discovered how to travel faster than light. The Sarani possessed technology that could reshape entire planets and weapons that could crack moons in half. And they looked upon the young human race the way adults might look at children who had wandered into a room full of important conversations. So, when the Celestin Council proposed a diplomatic marriage between Valith and a human male to secure peace with the Terran Federation, she accepted her duty with quiet resignation because that was what princesses did. She expected her human husband to be rough and uneducated and perhaps even barbaric based on everything her tutors had taught her about the violent history of Earth. What she got instead was a man named Daniel Harper. He arrived on the crystalline steps of the Sarandri Palace wearing a simple gray suit with his brown hair slightly messy from the shuttle ride. And he was neither particularly tall nor imposing in any way that she could see. His smile was warm but shy, and when he greeted her in flawless High Sarani, she noticed that his accent was surprisingly gentle and careful. "Your Highness," he said, while bowing in the traditional manner that her people used. "I hope I can be worthy of this honor." Valith studied him with her violet eyes and found herself confused because he seemed so ordinary and so unremarkable in every way. The bioscans that her medical team had performed showed nothing unusual at all. Just standard human physiology with a slightly elevated intelligence quotient and no genetic modifications or cybernetic enhancements of any kind. He had been a professor of ancient history on Earth before being selected for this diplomatic role, which explained his knowledge of her language but did nothing to explain why this council had chosen him specifically. "You may rise," she said in the formal tone she had been taught to use. "We have much to discuss about your responsibilities over the following months." Daniel proved himself to be exactly what he appeared to be, which was a kind and bookish man who spent most of his time in the palace library studying Sarani texts with genuine fascination. He never raised his voice at anyone, and he never demanded anything from the servants. And he treated the palace staff with the same respect that he showed to nobility, which many of the court found strange. Valith found herself confused by him more and more each day, because she kept waiting for the famous human aggression that her tutors had warned her about. But it never appeared. Daniel seemed more interested in ancient poetry than in politics, and he was more fascinated by her culture's history than by its military might, which made no sense to her. "Your people have achieved so much," he told her one evening as they walked through the palace gardens together. "But I notice your historical records are incomplete in certain areas, and there are gaps, especially around the time of the first Celestin awakening." Valith stiffened slightly at his words, because he was touching on sacred matters that outsiders rarely discussed. "Those records were lost during the divine schism," she said carefully. "Perhaps," Daniel said with a thoughtful look in his gray eyes, "or perhaps they were deliberately removed by someone who wanted those events forgotten." She dismissed his observation as mere academic curiosity, because how could a human who came from a civilization barely a century into spacefaring understand the mysteries that had confounded Sarani scholars for millennia? But as the weeks passed, she began to notice other things about her husband that she could not explain. There was the way he sometimes stared at the ancient temple across the valley with an expression on his face that she could not read, as if he was remembering something from long ago. There was the way he would touch certain artifacts in the palace museum and close his eyes, as if he was listening to something that only he could hear. And there was the strange way that the palace cats and the ceremonial birds would gather near him and sit perfectly still, watching him with an attention that seemed almost reverent, as if they knew something that she did not. Then came the incident with Ambassador Korath that changed everything. The Draxian ambassador had arrived for trade negotiations, and his species was known throughout the galaxy for their powerful psychic abilities that allowed them to sense things hidden from ordinary perception. When Korath entered the reception hall and his 4 eyes landed on Daniel, the 8-foot alien stopped cold in his tracks. His forearms began to tremble, and his normally gray skin turned pale white. And Valeth had never seen a Draxian show fear before that moment. "What manner of creature is this?" Korath whispered while backing away from Daniel. "What have you brought into your house, princess?" Daniel simply smiled his gentle smile and offered his hand in greeting as if nothing was wrong. "Ambassador, it is an honor to meet you," he said in a calm voice. Korath fled the palace that very night without completing the trade negotiations, and his official report claimed that he had fallen ill. But Valeth intercepted the private message he sent to his homeworld. "The humans have hidden something terrible among us." The message read, "Something ancient and powerful beyond measure, and we must not provoke them under any circumstances." When Valeth asked Daniel about the incident later that evening, he simply shrugged his shoulders. "Some species are more sensitive than others," he said. "I am sure it was nothing important." She wanted to believe him because she was beginning to enjoy his company and his gentle humor and his genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. But doubt had taken root in her mind, and it would not let go. Who was Daniel Harper really? And what was he hiding beneath that kind and ordinary surface? That night she went to the family vault where the oldest and most sacred texts were kept, scrolls that had not been read in thousands of years, and there in the brittle pages she found a warning written by her ancestors in the earliest days of the Empire. "Beware the quiet ones who walk among lesser races." The text said, "They wear mortal flesh like a garment, and they sleep for ages at a time, waiting for the moment when they must remember what they truly are." Valeth looked up from the scroll with her hearts pounding in her chest because the Sarani had 2 hearts, and both of them were racing now. She thought of Daniel in the library surrounded by his books. So gentle and so kind and so impossibly ordinary, and she wondered what would happen when he finally woke up. A year into their marriage, Valeth and Daniel were required to complete an ancient ritual called the Pilgrimage of Stars, which meant they had to visit the 7 sacred temples scattered across the Celestin Empire. This journey was meant to show that the royal couple was devoted to the Celestin faith and united as rulers. And every royal pair had completed it for thousands of years. Valeth approached the journey with a mixture of duty and curiosity, because she had never been particularly religious. But the temples held genuine historical importance. More than that, she wanted to watch Daniel in these sacred spaces, because perhaps the holy sites would finally reveal the truth about her mysterious husband. Their ship was a sleek Sarani cruiser named the Eternal Light, and it carried them first to the Temple of Ascending Dawn on the volcanic moon of Pirith. Temple was carved into the side of an active volcano, with its halls lit by rivers of hot magma flowing behind walls of unbreakable crystal. And it was one of the most beautiful and terrifying places in the Empire. High Priest Serenith greeted them at the entrance, and he was ancient even by Sarani standards, with silver hair flowing past his waist and eyes that had gone cloudy with age. He had served in this temple for over 300 years and had met dozens of royal couples. But when he saw Daniel standing beside Valeth, he stopped in the middle of his blessing. "Your Highness," the old priest said slowly, with his blind eyes somehow fixed on the human, "you did not tell us you were bringing a guest of such great significance." "This is my husband," Valeth said with confusion in her voice. "Daniel Harper of Earth." "Harper." Serenith repeated the name as if he was tasting something strange. "A human name. How very interesting. How very clever indeed." Daniel stepped forward and bowed respectfully to the old priest. "I am honored to visit your temple." "High Priest," he said in his usual gentle manner. Serenith reached out with trembling hands and touched Daniel's face. And then tears began streaming from his sightless eyes. "After so long," the old priest whispered. "After so very long, one of you has finally returned to us, High Priest." "You are mistaken," Daniel said gently. I am just a man. Nothing more. No, Serenith said with certainty in his voice. You are a man now, that is true, but you were not always a man. And the flesh may forget, but the spirit always remembers. He turned his blind face toward Valeth with an expression of wonder and fear mixed together. Princess, do you know what your ancestors did 12,000 years ago? Do you know why the Sorani rose to power so suddenly and became masters of 100 worlds in a single generation? Valeth shook her head because she did not know. We were given gifts, Serenith said. Technology and knowledge and the keys to the stars themselves. And in exchange we made a promise to shelter certain beings, to give them a safe place to sleep when they chose to live among mortal races. His blind gaze returned to Daniel. We were told they would return when they were needed. When the great darkness rose again, Valeth saw something flicker in Daniel's eyes. Something old and deep like light glimpsed at the bottom of an endless well. You should rest now, Daniel said to the priest. You have been standing too long. Serenith laughed softly at those words. You always did care for the small things, even when you wore a different face and different flesh. You noticed the servants when the kings ignored them. He allowed the temple attendants to guide him away, but he called back over his shoulder. The sleeping one wakes slowly. Princess, so be patient with him and be kind, because when he fully remembers what he is, he will need someone to remind him why being mortal matters. The next temple was the sanctuary of silent waters on an ocean world called Velith Prime. And here the priestess in charge collapsed unconscious the moment Daniel entered. The prayer chamber, she had to be carried out by her assistants while she murmured words in an ancient language that even the translation systems could not understand. At the third temple, the monastery of endless night on a rogue planet drifting alone between the stars. Every single candle in the entire building lit itself the moment Daniel crossed the threshold. At the fourth temple, sacred pools that had remained still and dark for thousands of years began to ripple and glow with golden light when he approached them. By the fifth temple, Valeth had stopped trying to explain what she was seeing, because there was no rational explanation for any of it. She simply watched her husband, this quiet man who read poetry and made her laugh with his terrible jokes, walk through these holy sites as if he was coming home after a very long time. Away he would touch ancient carvings on the walls and whisper corrections to the guides about historical details that had been lost for thousands of years. He would pause before certain doorways and speak words in languages that no living being should know, and everywhere he went, the old things responded to his presence. As artifacts hummed with power and sealed chambers opened by themselves, and priests fell to their knees in reverence or terror. On the night before they reached the sixth temple, Valeth finally found the courage to confront him. Who are you? She asked while standing in their shared quarters aboard the ship. What are you really? Daniel sat by the window staring out at the stars streaming past. And when he turned to look at her, his gray eyes seemed to hold infinite depth. I do not entirely know, he said. And for the first time she heard honest confusion in his voice. I remember being Daniel Harper. I remember growing up in a small town in Colorado. I remember playing baseball with my brother and studying ancient languages because they fascinated me. And those memories are real. They are mine. But there is something else, Valeth said. Yes, there are other memories, older ones. And they come to me in dreams and in flashes when I touch certain objects. He looked down at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. I remember watching the first Sorani ship leave your homeworld. I remember teaching the founders of your faith. I remember standing on a world that no longer exists while singing with beings whose names the universe has forgotten. Valeth felt both her hearts racing in her chest. Are you a god? She asked. Daniel's laugh was sad and tired. I do not think so. Not in the way you mean, but I think I was once something more than human. And I chose to become less. I chose to sleep and forget and be born and die as mortals do. He met her eyes with honesty in his gaze. I think I was tired. Valith, tired of watching civilizations rise and fall, tired of carrying the weight of knowing too much. So I hid myself among the young races and lived countless small lives and learned to love the simple things. Why are you remembering now? I do not know for certain. Maybe the universe needs me to. Maybe the darkness that the priest keeps speaking about is real and coming closer. He stood and walked toward her and took her hands gently in his. But I want you to know something important. Whatever I was before, and whatever I might become, the man who married you is real. Daniel Harper loves you. And that is not an act or a disguise. It is the truest thing I have ever been. Valith did not know what to say because she had entered this marriage, expecting a political arrangement and nothing. More instead, she had found a man who made her laugh and listened. When she spoke and remembered her favorite flowers and her childhood fears, and now she was learning that this same man might be older than her entire civilization, the Sixth Temple. She said finally, "What will happen when we get there?" Daniel's expression grew serious, and she saw something like fear in his eyes for the first time. I think I will finally find out who I really am. The Temple of Carthalos was the most sacred site in the entire Celestine Empire. Built on a dead world at the exact center of the galactic cluster where no stars shone and no life had ever grown, it had existed before the Sorani learned to travel between worlds. And some ancient texts claimed it had existed before the Sorani existed. At all, no one knew who had built this temple, because the architecture matched no known civilization, and the materials it was made from could not be identified by any scanner or test. At its heart stood a chamber called the Hall of Naming, where legend said the first Sorani ruler had received the divine command to lead their people to the stars. Only members of the royal family were allowed beyond the outer chambers, and even they approached the inner areas with great fear and respect when their ship landed on the ash-gray plains surrounding the temple. Valith noticed something that made her blood run cold. The structure, which had always been described as dark and dormant in every record she had read, was now glowing with pale golden light that pulsed from its tall spires like a slow heartbeat. It has never done that in all of recorded history. Her chief attendant, Lord Mather, said with barely hidden fear in his voice, "Your Highness, perhaps we should delay the ritual until we understand what is happening." "No," Valith said while watching Daniel stare at the temple with recognition in his eyes. "We continue as planned." The outer chambers of the temple were lined with enormous statues carved from black stone. And these statues show beings of many different forms. Some were humanoid in shape, while others were stranger, with too many limbs or bodies made of geometric shapes or faces that seemed to shift when you looked away. Valith had seen images of these statues many times in her education, and they had always been called representations of the divine ancestors. But Daniel walked among them slowly and reached out to touch each one with gentle fingers. "Lithindros," he said while brushing his hand against a four-armed figure. "You were always the most patient of us, waiting centuries for a single flower to bloom." He moved to another statue that looked like a vast serpent coiled around the sun. "Selthray, you loved the deep places where light never reached, the hearts of stars and the cores of worlds." Third statue showed a feminine form with wings made of pure geometric light. "Vanthia, you wept when the first mortal child was born. You said that death was the universe's greatest gift because it made every moment precious." "You knew them," Valith whispered. "I was one of them." Daniel replied. They reached the Hall of Naming at the temple's heart, and the doors that had been sealed for 12,000 years opened by themselves. When Daniel approached, inside was a vast circular chamber with a ceiling that showed not the sky above, but a Tove. view of the entire galaxy, spinning slowly in impossible detail. Every star visible as a tiny point of light. At the center of the room stood an altar made of something that was neither stone nor metal. And on that altar lay a single object. It was a sphere of pure light about the size of a human fist. And it floated a few inches above the altar's surface while spinning slowly in place. Daniel approached it as if he was walking in a dream. "This is it," he said with wonder and fear mixed in his voice. "This is what I left behind when I chose to sleep, my true name. My complete self." Valeth stayed near the door with her guards trembling beside her. But she had to ask, "What happens if you take it back?" "I become what I was, fully and completely, with all of my memories and all of my power restored." He turned to look at her, and she saw Daniel Harper fighting against something vast and ancient that was rising inside him. Two selves struggling for control of one body. But I will lose what I am now. The small human things, the ability to see beauty in mistakes, the joy of not knowing what comes next. "Then do not take it," she said. "Stay as you are. I may not have that choice." He pointed at the walls, and Valeth saw for the first time that they were covered in writing. Symbols and letters that seemed to move and change as she watched them. "The darkness is coming. The thing that my people locked away at the dawn of creation. It is broken free of its prison, and it has been eating civilizations at the edge of the universe for 1,000,000 years." His voice grew heavy with ancient sorrow. "In 1,000 years, it will reach your empire. And it cannot be stopped by ships or weapons or any technology that exists. Then how can it be stopped? By those who built the prison in the first place. By us." He looked at the sphere of light floating on the altar. "There were 12 of us at the beginning. And I do not know how many chose to sleep as I did, or how many still survive. But if I do not wake up, if I do not become what I was, then everything will be destroyed." Valeth walked forward until she stood beside him, despite her fear. And she took his hand in hers. It was a simple gesture that felt completely inadequate for the moment. "Will you forget me?" she asked. "No. Never. I have lived 1,000,000,000 years, and I have never forgotten anyone I loved." He squeezed her hand gently. "You will be with me forever. Valeth, you and every small kindness, every moment of happiness, every reason I chose to become mortal in the first place." Then he reached for the sphere. The moment his fingers touched it, light exploded through the chamber like a star being born. And Valeth was thrown backward by the force when she could see again. Daniel was gone. In his place stood something else. Something that was still humanoid in shape and still recognizable as the man she had married. But changed in ways that words could not capture. His skin glowed faintly as if lit from inside by a soft fire. And his eyes held actual stars, tiny points of light moving slowly in their depths when he breathed. The air around him shimmered like heat rising from hot stone. "Kellereth," he said, and the name vibrated through reality itself, making the walls hum and the floor shake. "That was what they called me in the beginning, the Gentle One. The Watcher of Small Things." Valeth rose slowly to her feet with her legs trembling beneath her. "Daniel," she said. Afraid of what the answer might be, he turned, and his expression softened, and the cosmic light around him dimmed slightly so she could see her husband's face within the divine radiance. "Still here," he said, and his voice was still kind. "Still me. Just more than I was before." He extended his glowing hand toward her, and she took it despite everything. His touch was warm and human, despite his transformation. "I need to find the others," he said. "I need to wake them before the darkness arrives. But first, there is something else I must do." "What is that?" He smiled, and it was still Daniel's smile, crooked and kind and full of gentle humor. "I need to introduce my wife to my family." News of what happened at the Temple of Kar Thalos spread across the galaxy within days, traveling faster than any ship could fly the Celestine empires. Carefully protected secrets crumbled as priests and scholars from every temple came forward with ancient texts that confirmed what Valeth had witnessed. The Sarani had always known that their rise to power was guided by beings older than the stars themselves. The other galactic powers reacted in different ways to this news. The Draxian collective immediately asked for an alliance because their psychic leaders had sensed the truth about Daniel long before anyone else understood what he was. The Vorthine hegemony, a military empire on the border of Sarani space, declared that the whole thing was a lie created to justify Sarani expansion into their territory. And the Terran Federation, Daniel's own people from Earth, sent urgent messages asking for an explanation of how one of their citizens had become a god. Valeth found herself in a very strange position because she was now married to a being who had existed since the birth of the universe. Daniel, or Calarith, as he was known in his true form, had kept more of his humanity than she expected. He still enjoyed drinking tea in the mornings, and he still read poetry when he had quiet moments, and he still made terrible jokes that made Valeth groan and shake her head. But there were differences that she could not ignore. He no longer needed to sleep, and he could be in multiple places at the same time by spreading his awareness across distances that would take ships years to cross. And he was very busy because he spent most of his time reaching out across the galaxy with senses she could not understand, searching for others like himself. There were 12 of us in the beginning, he explained one evening as they walked through the palace gardens together. We called ourselves the First Light, though that was never really an official name. He paused to look up at the stars that were just becoming visible in the darkening sky. We were born in the earliest moments of the universe, shaped by forces that no longer exist. And we spent ages building and creating and helping life grow across 1 billion different worlds. And then the darkness came. Valeth said. We called it the Hollow. And it was not evil exactly, at least not in the way that people usually mean when they use that word. His expression grew troubled as he remembered. It was hungry, an emptiness that wanted to consume everything and return the universe to the nothing it came from. And we could not destroy it because you cannot destroy absence itself. So we trapped it instead in a prison of folded space at the edge of everything. But it has escaped now. The locks are weakening because time touches even our creations. Eventually, he sighed and she saw the weight of billions of years in his eyes. I have found 3 others so far. Methan was sleeping among the Draxians as a simple trader who sold cloth in the marketplace. And she does not fully remember herself yet, but she is starting to. And Vorath was hiding in the outer rim as a hermit on a frozen moon where no one ever visited. That is good news, Valeth said. Yes. But there is bad news as well. Sirithas was sleeping among the Vorthine. And when their seers sensed her awakening, they killed her mortal body before she could fully return to herself. His voice carried deep sadness when he spoke of this. She's not truly dead because we cannot really die. But it will take her centuries to rebuild herself. And that is time we may not have. Valeth felt fear run through her like cold water. Can they hurt you too? My mortal form, yes. If I am caught by surprise. He touched her face gently with fingers that still felt warm and human. Which is why I need you to do something for me. Something very important. Tell me what you need. I need you to speak to the Galactic Senate and explain what is coming. You must convince them that the threat is real and that all the races must work together to survive it. He smiled at her with confidence in his eyes. They will trust a Sarani princess more than they will trust a being they have been taught to fear. Valeth spent weeks preparing for the most important speech of her life. The Galactic Senate was a gathering of representatives from over 400 different species. Held on a neutral space station called Concordia Prime, she studied each culture's beliefs and fears so that she could speak to them in ways they would understand. And she practiced her words until they felt natural on her tongue when she finally stood before the assembled delegates. She felt very small and very mortal. She was asking ancient enemies and suspicious strangers to trust in something they could not see or touch. "I know what many of you believe," she began. "You believe this is a Sarani trick or a human plot or perhaps a mass delusion. And I cannot offer you proof that will satisfy every single doubt." She paused and looked across the vast chamber at hundreds of alien faces watching her. "I can only tell you what I saw with my own eyes and what I know in my hearts to be true." She spoke for an hour, describing the temples and the awakening and the thread that Daniel had shown her through shared visions. She explained that the Hollow was consuming dead galaxies at the edge of the universe and moving closer every day, and that in 1,000 years it would reach them all. "The first light asks for nothing except time," she said at the end. "Time to gather their lost family, time to repair the ancient locks, time to save everything we love." She took a deep breath before her final words. "They do not want worship or submission. They only want to continue what they have always done, which is to protect life and nurture growth and hold back the darkness." The response was mixed as some delegates stood and cheered, while others walked out in anger. The Vorthian ambassador accused her of lying and threatened war against anyone who supported this deception, but when the vote was held, a slim majority agreed to form a temporary alliance. Resources would be shared between races that had never cooperated before. Information would be exchanged freely, and the search for the remaining First Light would become an effort that involved the entire galaxy. That night, Valith returned to their ship completely exhausted and collapsed into Daniel's arms. "Was it enough?" she asked. It was in Daniel's arms? Was it in Daniel's arms? "Was it enough?" she asked. "It was a beginning," he said while holding her close. "And beginnings are where all great things start." Outside their window, the stars burned on against the vast darkness. Tiny lights that refused to go out no matter how empty the space around them became. 5 years passed and the galaxy was transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. Old enemies became reluctant allies, and scientists from 100 different worlds worked together on projects that would have seemed impossible just a decade earlier. And one by one, the First Light awakened from their long sleep among the mortal race. Miethan remembered her true self while holding her newborn grandchild in her arms, and the surge of protective love she felt unlocked memories of nurturing entire species into Ayer. Existensivorth awakened during deep meditation on his frozen moon when the silence finally became deep enough for his ancient self to speak to. And mothers emerged from hiding across the galaxy, some happily and some reluctantly, and some were so confused by thousands of years of mortal lives that they needed a long time to find their true selves again. By the 5th year, 9 of the original 12 had returned, but 3 remained. Lost One had been killed like Sirithus, and her reforming consciousness was scattered across dimensions, where it would take ages to gather itself together. One slept so deeply that even Daniel's vast searches could not find any trace of them, and one, the most powerful of them all, the architect who had designed the original locks that held the Hollow prisoner, had vanished completely without leaving any trace in any dimension. "We need Lumineth," Daniel told the assembled First Light in their meeting place, which was a pocket dimension shaped like an endless library with books stretching to infinity in every direction. "Without her knowledge, the locks cannot be fully repaired, and we can slow the Hollow down and contain it for a while. But unless we find her, the prison will eventually fail. Then we keep searching," said Methan, who appeared as both a grandmother with gray hair and a radiant being of light at the same time. "We have less time than we thought," said Voreth, who looked like an old man wrapped in frost. He waved his hand, and the library walls showed images of the universe's edge where black tendrils of emptiness were spreading faster than before, swallowing stars and worlds with growing hunger. The hollow can sense that we are waking up, and it is afraid. And a frightened predator is twice as dangerous as a calm one. The discussion continued for hours as they considered different plans and backup strategies. Valith sat quietly in a corner and listened because she was technically only present as Daniel's wife and had no real authority among these ancient beings. But she noticed something that none of them seemed to see. There was a section of the library that was locked and sealed with heavy chains, and everyone ignored it as they debated. But as Valith watched, the chains on those doors began to glow very faintly, almost too dim to notice, but definitely responding to something. When the meeting ended and Daniel returned to their quarters, she told him what she had observed. The restricted section, he said with a complicated expression on his face. That is where we stored memories that were too dangerous to carry with us. Regrets and mistakes and the parts of ourselves we could not bear to remember. Would Lumineth have stored something there? It is possible. But opening those vaults requires confronting what is inside them. And the last time one of us tried, they chose to end themselves rather than face what they had done. What did they do? Daniel was quiet for a long time before answering. We were not always kind, Valith. In the early ages, when we were young and proud, we made terrible mistakes. His voice was heavy with old shame. We destroyed civilizations that we judged unworthy. We changed species without asking their permission. We acted like gods because we had the power and no one could stop us. He closed his eyes as if the memory caused him pain. The hollow was our greatest creation, a weapon we designed to end the war, and then we could not control what we had made. And we only managed to imprison it after it had consumed 1,000 worlds that we had promised to protect. So your guilt created the very threat you now fight against. Yes. And perhaps our redemption lies in finally facing that truth. The next day, Valith went to the restricted section of the library alone. She was not one of the first light, and she should not have been able to open the sealed doors. But when she touched the chains, they fell away, as if the library itself recognized her right to be there inside. She found not monsters or horrors, but memories preserved like pressed flowers. Fragile and ancient and full of meaning, she saw the first light as they once were. Not wise guardians, but confused children with too much power and no understanding of consequences. She saw their cruelties and their arrogance, and their slow, painful journey toward wisdom over billions of years. And she saw Lumineth, the oldest and wisest of them all, the one who first understood that power without love was meaningless. Lumineth had sacrificed most of her own essence to build the locks that imprisoned the hollow. And before she went to sleep, she had left a message. If you are reading this, the recording said, then the locks are failing and my brothers and sisters are searching for me, but I am not lost. I have been waiting. The image of Lumineth smiled with tired but peaceful eyes, waiting for the universe to create something that I could never make myself. Because we failed in our duty when we saw mortals as lesser beings who needed our guidance. And we never understood that they were not weaker than us, only different. Her voice grew stronger with conviction. Their brief lives burned brighter than our endless ones, and their ability to change and grow and love in the shadow of death. This is the true power of creation. She leaned forward as if speaking directly to whoever would find this message. The key to building new locks is not our divine strength, but mortal courage. So find someone who has touched the infinite and remained human in their heart. Someone who loves not despite understanding forever, but because of it. And when you find them, they will know what must be done. Valith understood what Lumineth meant when she emerged from the restricted section. Daniel was waiting for her with worry clear on his face. I know what you were, she said to him. I know about the mistakes you made, and the worlds that died because of your pride. I am sorry. I should have told you everything from the beginning. Yes, you should have. She took his hands in hers. But I also know what you chose to become. And you did not have to care about small things or learn to love as mortals do. But you did. And that changed you into someone worthy of being loved in return. She told him about Lumineth's message and what it revealed. The key to stopping the hollow is not your power, she said. It is mortal love, the kind that knows it will end someday. The courage that exists even when we are afraid. The hope that refuses to die no matter how dark things become. Daniel's eyes widened as he understood. The locks need to be strengthened with something we could never provide on our own. They need to be reinforced with what mortality creates. Valeth said, and that means they need us, all of us. Every mortal being who chooses to believe that light is worth fighting for. The final confrontation with the Hollow was not the spectacular battle that legends would later describe with fleets of ships and explosions of cosmic energy. It was quieter than that and stranger. First light traveled to the edge of the universe, where the ancient locks groaned under the pressure of hungry emptiness pushing against them from the other side. They were joined by ships from 1,000 different worlds, not to fight with weapons, but to witness and to hope, and at the center of everything stood Valeth, one mortal woman holding hands with 9 divine beings, serving as a channel for something that transcended them all. We offer not our power, but our purpose. She spoke the words that Lumineth had left for this moment. Not our strength, but our love. Not our immortality, but our willingness to die for something greater than ourselves. The locks blazed with new light that was not the cold radiance of the first light, but something warmer and more fragile and infinitely more precious. It was the light of 1 billion mortal souls choosing hope. Instead of despair, the Hollow screamed in rage, and fear it was not destroyed because nothing could truly destroy emptiness itself. But it was bound again with chains forged from the very thing it wanted to consume: life itself and love itself, and the stubborn refusal of mortal beings to accept that existence was meaningless when it was over. Valeth collapsed in Daniel's arms, exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced. Did we win? She whispered. For now, he said gently. For 1,000,000 years, perhaps. And when the locks weaken again, there will be new mortals to strengthen them with new love and new hope. And what will you do now? Daniel looked up at the stars where his ancient family waited, his eternal responsibility and cosmic burden. Then he looked at her and smiled the same crooked smile that she had fallen in love with years ago when he was just a professor from Colorado who loved poetry and made terrible jokes. I thought I might stay mortal for a while longer, he said. If you will have me. Valeth laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound in the entire universe. I suppose I can tolerate you, she said. Husband. Above them the stars burned on, small lights against the vast darkness, fragile and fierce and absolutely refusing to fade, just like the mortals who loved them.